So, I'm gonna start talking, and okay, nice to hear the silence. Very nice. We started with 25 minutes late. I'm very sorry for that, but you can imagine this is our first alumni event, so a lot of things had to be done and managed in a way that is not necessarily easy to manage. And this is also something I wanted to transmit as a first message. This was a tremendous amount of work that was done. And for me, as you, I'm an engineer, and all the other guys that organized it, the other alumni are also engineers. We are not events managers. And you can imagine you have to learn a lot of things. And it's, I can really recommend this. It's a very nice experience. You learn really to risk management. This is a big thing. You have to really think what can be wrong. And there's 900 people that were invited. In the end, we are here 170 almost. And this means for each person, each individual is different. And you can imagine everyone has a different problem, to say it in a nice way. And then you have to solve this problem. So this was something that I think it's a very valuable experience you can then, the one organizing can share with you. And I encourage you to ask the question, what did it take to organize this? First of all, I'd like to just keep it short with some announcements that will be useful information for you. So one thing, and also one more thing regarding the organization, we wanted to apologize for the travel agency. This was, and make a short explanation for those that had problems with the travel agency. And it was due to the fact that giving a short amount of, a little amount of money for as a subsidy was, if in not paying the whole flight, which you are used with Kikino Energy in general, is quite a difficult thing, and was the first time that we did it with Kikino Energy. So new processes had to be installed, and especially for us to plan this, as it was our thing, the easiest thing would have been to use the agency. They just booked the flight for you, and then we receive one final bill. This would have been the idea. And then all these kind of little problems came up, and we're very sorry for these problems. We could not foresee them. Also, some of them they didn't tell us. And we guarantee that next year we'll do it much better, because this is also a nice message for you to know already. Probably next year we'll do it again. And you'll see how it's gonna go. I think you're gonna like this. You're gonna think back of this exact message and think, nice. Okay, so a second thing, Bizaboo. I don't know if you have already downloaded the app or have checked out the website. There you can see all the profiles and all the people that are attending the conference, just in case you're interested in knowing who exactly is doing what. Before also just talking with a person, maybe somebody has the same interest, a skill you'd like to learn, something you'd like to exchange with, and so you have all the LinkedIn profile connected to the app, and you can also message people there just in case you want to meet up then afterwards or keep in touch. Just I think it's a cool thing, and so we have access to it. It was a paid app. You can download it for free, and there you can also find the agenda and some further announcements we can make through there. So if there's also some emergency, you can contact us there. So it will be a push notification to us, and we will also be able to notify you in case there's anything urgent. Then big thing, and it's now I feel a bit like bad to say it. Respect times. Okay, we didn't respect the times now, but we try to respect them in all the sessions. So we'll have a person that will also try to keep the times. This will be for the speakers, for the pitching sessions, etc. So we ask you kindly to respect them by being on time to when they start. Otherwise, when there's always people coming late in, that's a huge distraction. And also, we're never going to finish the program, which is quite intense. You're going to see more in detail now. So this Probably it's a bit small, but I think you don't have to know it in detail. It's just to see, just have a brief overview. So we'll start with a very nice keynote speaker, Stefan, who is here with us, an exciting entrepreneur. For me, one of the most, if not the most exciting of Kikino Energy. And he will share a very nice experience with us. And then we'll have basically my status quo and vision of what's going on in the community and what will be happening in the future. And then the human capital manager, who is here with us, Marlush, who is working for Kikino Energy, is also going to share with you what the career center can offer you as a student and as an alumni. And then we'll have Falco, who some of you might know, who is also an alumni organizer, who will introduce the network design session, which is one of the biggest sessions, and it's a very important one. So he'll tell us more about it. You might be wondering what it is actually. And then dinner, and we'll have basically the swimming pool. As you might have seen, there's a swimming pool and a sauna area and so on in the hotel. So we'll, in the evening after the dinner, we will have a common time there. I think it's going to be fun. The thing is, the swimming pool just goes until 11 p.m., unfortunately. But I think tonight we'll have time after. Dinner is probably not going to go so long as we planned here, so we can go early as well. Then for the other days, so we'll have another network design in the mornings of Saturday and Sunday. As I said, Falco will say more. Then we'll have also another keynote speaker who is working in sustainable also architecture, Salvatore. And then very nice parallel alumni speakers. No, first of all, we'll have the pitching sessions. So if the pitching sessions, the idea is if you have any idea or project or thing you would like to share with the others, you can still apply. There's already 15 people that will do it. So it's we said 5 minutes, you don't have to prepare slides or something, you're just free talking, and then 5 minutes questions. And it's going to be a parallel session, so over 4 rooms. And there's still 5 positions, so be quick and go to Ivan in the back. You can see him there standing. He's the responsible person, so talk to him if you want to still do it. Be quick. You can do that then at the break. And then the alumni speakers, so we have 8 very great speakers that are all alumni. And you can then, tomorrow I'll say more about it as well, to how to get to which session to get, because there's full parallel sessions with limited numbers, so we'll see how you can then subscribe to one. And then, just here the speakers that I was just mentioning. And one last thing, and this is a very important one, I think one of the most important ones. I'd like the organizers of the Alumni Connect maybe to come here so that they can I can just introduce them, please. So for Falco, as I was saying, is the network design. He's content team. He was responsible for especially design and network design, but also helped in many other things. Then there's Ivano, as I call him. Who was responsible in logistics, so he made all the thing, and content as well. Yeah, but it was more like, he did more or less everything. And Nathan, communication, you might have interacted quite a lot with him via email. Then we have Roberta and Anka from the logistics teams as well. Also, they made a lot of effort in especially showing you the content, the program, and the hotel, and transport, and whatnot. And Davide, also the content team, so he brought some speakers over here and also helped in a few other things. And Robin, finance and content, also more or less everything was here. I think it is also important for you to know that some people, they even dedicated time without being able to come at the end. Michel from Nigeria, also he's having had personal issues, so he's gonna go back to Nigeria just like a few days ago, he told us. And then Arjun, and this is also very noble of him, he just invested all his time. In the end, he's not gonna come. From the start, actually, he knew he would not come, and he dedicated a lot of time in organizing, especially the pitching sessions and the content, the speakers, and so on. So I'd like to give a round of applause. Yeah. I'm sorry to say that I just forgot one of the most important persons who actually made this hotel especially possible. So Karina, she's joining us tonight, and she made this very nice location for us possible. So also, if I can ask for applause. So I think without further ado, let's start with the real things, which is the program. And I would like to invite Stefan to the stage, and I'll hand over the mic and everything.
So, to start off, I think I want to definitely also mention that I want to thank Claudio and the team, organizing team, for having me over here, because it's really very exciting to be in front of, such a really enthusiastic group. I'm also already within Kik for 2.5 years, and I've kind of feeling the vibe for all those 2.5 years, and I see the same vibe. I talked to kind of the organizing team yesterday evening, and I really felt that energetic vibe. So it's great to be here. Another thing that I would like to mention before I really start off my presentation is, so I've done a lot of different things in my career, and one of the things that I've done was in the telecommunications sector. And there actually we were at the boom, the start of the data part of telecommunications, so wireless WAN. We had 3G, 4G. So we're actually at the verge of when data telecommunication became a big thing. And then indeed you also felt the vibe with all those small companies. So also I was part of one of those small companies that made actually the first 3G data card. And at some point in my career, I shifted over to energy. That's why I'm here. But similar principles, networking, IT, analytics, data, all that stuff is really coming back into energy. And that same type of vibe is actually that I'm feeling also again here in the energy sector. So I think within a couple of years, you guys will also remember, as I have remembered the telecom days, that you are into a special area. You can really transform the energy area. That's really important to understand. So then, to my speech, so Claudio asked me, well, give a speech, but don't make it too much about your company, just kind of give a speech. So I thought, okay, what shall I give? So I thought, okay, let me give something which is a little bit more longer term and then hopefully can get you going home and get you some further ideas. I guess you all have a lot of ideas, but this is really about the longer term ideas that I want to talk about. So that was also my title. So my title is really, you need to keep on dreaming big. Now, actually, technology is evolving so fast that if you're dreaming big, you can actually achieve those things. So do remember that you need to keep on dreaming big. Okay, so before we go to that, now that is strange. Some part of my presentation got missed out. Fine. There was one slide kind of presenting myself, and I'll just stick to this slide then. So what I wanted to say about myself is that, so I'm also an engineer. I think as a lot of people here in the audience are also engineers. Throughout my career, I did a business degree. I worked at various different companies. I started my career at Philips Natlab doing pure research. I worked at various startup companies, so in the software, in the semiconductor, telecommunication, designed hardware, and then at some point in time evolved also into the energy sector. So that's a little bit of my background. But a couple of my passions are, during my career, always have been innovation. So I've always been really, really very much into innovation. That was also one of the topics yesterday evening, like, okay, how can you do innovation within a company? As an entrepreneur, it's kind of easy, but in a company, you can also do that as kind of an intrapreneur. So innovation has always been very important to me. On top of that, that was also one of the topics yesterday evening, is about persistence. And I think really if you want to achieve your goals, being persistent is really incredibly important. Because everyone sees only the success stories, but doesn't see really what happened to get to that success. And what really is there is you have to be persistent. There's a lot of failures along your path, but having gone through those failures and being persistent, that really allows you to achieve those big successes. So that's another very important thing. Another thing, and that's kind of the last point about me, but also just in general, is there is a statement which kind of is more allocated to Einstein, and he says, well, the only constant is change, but actually it came from a Greek philosopher like 400 years before Christ, and he also already thought, yeah, change is the only constant. And that definitely in the days that we are now, I mean the ages that we are now, it's going so rapidly, so really change is really the only constant in your whole career. So, what I wanted to talk about today is a couple of things. So first, indeed, just talk about a couple of big problems around in the world, but not stick to those kind of doomsday problems, but really think what are the solutions to those problems, because everyone talks about those problems. I just want to highlight a couple of them, but then talk about the real problems, the real solutions, and then also actually talk about one example being the company that I started up within Kik. So that's kind of the topic that I wanted to discuss today. So, food. Does anybody have an idea if I kind of put this picture on here? Meat. I guess most of you have eaten meat, or maybe some of you don't, but I guess a lot of people do eat meat. Do you have any idea kind of what the ratio is when you have kind of like a kilogram, or in this case 9 kilograms of meat? What type of water you would need to actually get to that 9 kilogram of meat?
It's animal dependent. 14,000 per kilogram.
How many? 15,000 liter per kilogram. Well, yeah, you're getting close, but you can still increase that. The actual ratio is really quite astonishing. So for 9 kilograms of meat, you need 1,000 tons of water. So that's right, a lot of water. I mean, 1,000 tons, that's like 2,000 people a whole year providing that for drinking water, and that only for 9 kilograms of meat. And you need, the reason why that is, it's a very inefficient process, the transformation of water to grains, because that's kind of the main substance that these animals eat, then indeed transform that to meat, is a really very inefficient process. So I think this is really important for you to understand that meat, it has a really high impact on our whole ecology. And to give you some other numbers there, because of this, and there's other reasons also why there's so much water being consumed, this is another number. There's, like every year, there's 160 billion tons of water that is not being replenished anymore. So that means the water levels all over the world are decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. That's really a lot of water. And to give you one further idea how much that now actually is this one here. That 160 billion tons of water, that equates to a line of trucks of 500,000 kilometers running around the whole day, and that really for a whole year long. That's really the amount of water that is being depleted on a year. Our resources, so global meat consumption, well, that's kind of one thing, it's going up, but these are kind of some of the numbers. So like a couple of years ago, we had 37 kilogram meat on average per person. That's going to go up if we keep on having the same lifestyle as we have now to about more than 50 kilogram per person per year. Take into account again the water consumption needed for that. That's really a huge impact on this whole ecological system. The other point that I want to make is that the population is rising, and therefore also the GDP. But the GDP is actually rising, not linearly, but actually rising exponentially with the amount of people. And that is because indeed these various nations, they also want to have kind of the Western standard of living. So that means there's a lot more impact. And you see that in all the kind of materials that are being used. That's the graph that I wanted to show there. So if we're not careful, and what I'm seeing now is, I think this is a presentation. This is the different presentation that should have been on there. But okay, let's see if we can manage with this one. So if we're not careful, by 2030, we will have 3.5 Earths. We will need 3.5 Earths to actually sustain the amount of consumption that is going on. So as you can see here, indeed, climate change, everyone knows that. There's a lot of statistics about that. These are kind of a little bit of those evidence there. And also due to climate change, there's a lot more major disasters happening, and I think this number, I guess some of you know that, but I just wanted to put that out there, that due to climate change, if it increases to 2 degrees Celsius, there will be kind of an economic impact of between 70 and 100 billion per year. And insurance companies are now already really being threatened there because that might be really a financial catastrophe for these insurance companies. So that's really also very important to understand. Another thing which really allocates to one of these major problems out there is actually destitute nations. So a couple of numbers out there, and those are really very astonishing. Less than 0.0001%, like some people in cycling do say, actually owns about 10% of the whole global GDP, which is really astonishing. I mean, we have like 1,800 people which own like about 7 trillion wealth. And from those, 1/4 are actually owning 4.7 trillion wealth. That's an astonishing number. When you look on the other side, there's kind of more than 500 million people that actually live on less than $1 per day. And 10% of the whole wealth is really allocated to 0.0001% of the population. Now that is really also a very dangerous cocktail to any type of economical disruption and war disruption. So that's also an important thing to know. Yeah, of course, there's a lot of other things that I could talk more in detail about, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. So runaway technology, I think a lot of you know about that. That's the fact that indeed, I mean, there are scientists amongst ourselves that work from a passion about this science, but if you give them in the wrong hands, they can really turn into something which is not handleable anymore. That's kind of runaway technology. Aging population, and I'll mention that in kind of one of the solutions, one of the technological solutions, but that is also a major problem happening there. Greed, as you can also know, a lot of kind of these nations in some, let's say in South America, some in Africa, and actually also very recently in Western Europe, like maybe 50 years ago. Greed has always been a very bad thing, let's say, towards human civilization. Apprentice with a giant toolbox, I just want to allude a little bit further on that. What that actually means is that the technology has evolved so fast, has become actually so cheap, but to do really major, important potential disasters. So if you would kind of like go 50 years back, it would not be possible to make a nuclear reactor on your own. I mean, you just need so much capex, so capital expenditure, and so much people to actually make that happen. Nowadays, if we talk about, okay, what can happen, let's say, from a cybercrime perspective, actually you need a very smart guy and you need a lot of PCs, and you can really, I mean, break down a whole country. So really, that's what I'm meaning with Apprentice with Giant Toolbox, that your technology has become so cheap, so easy to do from single-person perspective, that it can become very dangerous too. And of course, there's people that think there's no issue. So, those are kind of some of the downsides, but there's definitely a lot of upsides. So what's the savior out there? I want to start off, and I know a lot of you guys have a scientific background, but I just wanted to also kind of tell a story about that, and a lot of people know about exponential curves, but I just wanted to highlight what a real exponential curve is. So it's really highlighting the fact based on a story of a king, kind of like 1,000 years ago or something like that, and he needed advice within his kingdom. So we consulted various consultants, and one of them said, yeah, well, I want to consult you my whole life long, and I'll make it very simple. I mean, I'll come up with all the answers that you have, and the only thing that you need to give me is like 1 grain, and you double that every 18 months. Well, the king said, well, that's a great deal. Let's sign here and let's take off. Okay, so after 18 months, the guy got 1 grain of rice. Okay, king was very happy. Consultant didn't say anything. 31 years later, down the line, well, the king had to give 1 bag of rice. He said, well, this is really a terrific deal. He's giving me such valuable advice, and I just have to pay him 1 bag of rice. Okay, great. Year 49, the king had to give already like 1 million truckloads of rice. 1 million. In year 76. Going even further, then it became a really disaster. Then it was kind of the end of the kingdom. In year 96, he actually had to give 8 billion truckloads of rice. I mean, this is really why I'm saying that is to kind of physically visualize what an exponential curve is, what the impact of a true exponential curve is. Because it's very easy from a mathematical perspective what an exponential curve is, but what the real physical impact of that is, that's something that you can kind of always remember. I don't know if any of you know what this is.
It's cardinal.
Yeah, good. And what? When?
It was in end of the 50s or beginning of the 60s. It's the IBM hard drive, few kilobytes of RAM, few kilobytes of space, something like that.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's nearly spot on. So this is really what it is. I'll just kind of voice it out. This is the IBM, the first IBM hard drive. So it's not kind of a closet with clothes or anything like that, or potatoes. This is really the first hard drive. And there was 5 megabytes. There was a little bit more, but and that was 1956. So 5 megabyte. This is what they're pushing in 1956. Just think of that. So I guess maybe some of you still know. I'm not sure if you really know. I mean, that was kind of, I still know that. This is a floppy disk of 1.44 megabyte. Wow, 1.44 megabyte was something like this. That was really fantastic stuff. So we put our games on that. Okay. Then we go somewhat further in the time. That's about like 2000-ish. We had kind of the micro SD. So same, and actually a lot more memory came on something which is something like this size. Okay, going further down the line, actually very close by, 2015, 2016, we will have kind of the same capacity on that same small area there of the human brain. And let's say the amount of terabyte of a human brain varies depending on how you kind of look at it. So it can vary somewhere between, also from person to person, of course, between 100 terabyte and 2.5 petabyte. But that's really, I mean, it's a wide variation, so to be defined, but kind of the first order that will be very close by in that same little area. Going somewhat further, 2030, you'll have 20,000 of those brains on that same area. Going even somewhat further, you'll have the 2009 internet on that same area. Going even further, by 2050, you'll actually have 3 times the world's brains by that point in time on that same area for the same cost. That's an exponential trend that's happening there. So, I already said it. So what are the consequences of these exponential trends? Because that's really driving all this fundamental technological evolution. That constant is really the only change, and the change is going really, really rapid. So that's very important. So all the stuff in your courses as an engineer that you learn about, like regarding revolutions, S-curves and all that stuff, that's actually happening now at a very fast pace. I mean, even kind of in my professional career, so before I did my startup, 15 years, another story, I mean, when you look at a mobile phone, everyone uses now a mobile phone, everyone uses a smartphone, but you just Google on the internet and you find out, type in there, okay, usage of mobile phones or questionnaires about mobile phones, and you typically find them kind of the years 90s, and they ask people like, well, they're 18 years, 20 years, or of course also 30, whatever, and the answers that you get are, mobile phone, what on earth is that? Why would you use that? I mean, I don't want to be available, they don't need to call me. I mean, yeah, they can fax me, or they can send me a letter, or they can come by. Well, why would I want to be available? That just doesn't make any sense. That's really a very silly service. Now we actually have really, I mean, more mobile phones than we have people. So these S-curves, these transformations that's going to be part of our lives, and we're going to have to really cope with that. So, what's the future? I guess some of you guys have seen these movies. So, is that the future? Well, I'll give it some thought, but you definitely have seen some of these movies. So, the thing which a lot of people kind of get very confused is, well, they make prediction about the short term, and then they're really kind of way off. And then the long term, well, actually, they can't really make any predictions about it because they don't really know the techniques of making those predictions, and I'll come back on that in one slide. So what people typically look at is kind of the short-term things that are happening. So it's like, well, the latest app or doing kind of a small transformation, this and that. Yes, there are things happening, but you also have to look at what are kind of the real big waves out there. And some things which really denote big changes are, for instance, 3D printing. I mean, 3D printing that can really transform the whole society. So that's the things that you need to look at. You don't need to look at all these small little things happening there. You need to look at the ones that are really potentially big and transforming. So one of my things that I've also done, and I really highly recommend that. I mean, you're really an excellent bunch of people. So maybe some of you have heard about Singularity University. I don't know. Has anybody heard of that? That's great. Okay. Has anybody been there? Oh, okay, that's good. So I really highly recommend you going there because I did that. And so then I guess you guys know Ray Kurzweil too? Yeah, so that's what got me into Singularity University. So I, again, was always interested in innovation, and kind of the guy that made predictions, that triggered me, because I read now and then these predictions, and actually these people were just kind of from a subjective fact making predictions. But that guy had really quantitatively underpinned his predictions, and he had really found out that there are a lot of future predictions relate to exponential curves. And when you go further, it is all related to the digitization. And digitization, you can really very quickly and accurately also forecast. And based on that, if you say, if this and this happens at that cost, well, this can happen. I'll give you a couple of examples. So Singularity University, if those are kind of one of the points that you need to take away, keep that in mind, look it up on Google, and well, have a thought about it, because it's really very interesting. So those guys, and Ray Kurzweil has been kind of the driver, he came up with, well, what are kind of the 5 big technological underlying trends which can really influence our society. So he came up with nanotechnology, networks, computers. He came up with kind of the whole stuff of medicine, neuroscience, energy, AI, robotics, bioscience, bioinformatics. Those are kind of really the 5 big pillars which are going to fundamentally reshape our whole society. So a couple of examples of that. Nanotechnology. So, well, you know the nanotube. I guess a lot of people know the nanotube, even a lot better than me, because I guess you have some physics and chemists in here, so I won't allude in detail on that. But as one example, due to this technology, I mean, there's like thousands of applications already that use these kind of principles, and also thinking like, well, let's have an elevator to the moon. That is possible with this type of technology. We've kind of traditionally just kind of steel cable. The steel cable, its own weight is just too heavy. The cable is going to break after a certain length. With this technology, it is possible. Networking computers, well, you all know about that, so I'm not going to allude too far on that. But I mean, just take into account again that 5 megabyte. That's what you need to think about. That 5 megabyte about IBM. That was a whole closet that they were pushing in a container there. And that you have now in 10,000 fold on your smartphone. So just think of this really vast, fast evolution there. Medicine and neuroscience. One thing, there's really so much things that are happening there, very exciting things. And one thing, when I was at Sony, I was also responsible for technology scouting. And I had the opportunity to also scout quite a lot in Israel. And there was a lot of very exciting things happening there. And one of the things that drew my attention was actually they had this holographic technology by means of lasers, where they could very accurately, real-time, emulate, well, actually living organs. And the technology that they were making there, the idea of that was that indeed you can do then remote operations, because you can really remote see what's happening in 3D. So the guy that's doing the surgery, he's actually doing the surgery on a holographic image. And so that's just one example, but there's like thousands of examples of things happening in this whole medicine and neuroscience. Energy and environment, again, there's a lot of things. I'll give you one example a couple of slides further. Fusion, cold fusion, that was one of the discussion topics yesterday, and there's a person that can talk a lot better about that, so I'll leave that to her. But there's a lot happening on that field too. AI and robotics, nowadays there's just, well, so much things. So you know when I told about a couple of the big problems there, aging, so when I was at Sony, I also had to travel quite a lot to Japan. And there you really physically see that there's an aging population. I mean, you don't really see this whole young bunch here. Very difficult to get a hold of such a young bunch there in one room in Japan. There's really an aging population. Now the consequences, but also the upside is, I mean, those guys, they also need help, assistance. That's kind of part of also aging as it currently is. So that has really been the driver of investing very heavily in AI, artificial intelligence, and robotics. So Japan is really one of those regions where a lot of this stuff is happening. And actually, some of you have maybe read it, but a couple of months ago, the first hotel in Japan opened, the first in the world, that is fully automated, fully robotized. There's no one in there anymore. There's just no person at all anymore. And they have the plan of really kind of implementing that across of Japan, because they say we don't have enough people to staff our hotels. So it's happening. Biotech and bioinformatics, I mean, well, the system-on-chip principle you probably know. System-on-chip, that was kind of, well, where you have a lot of electronics with different functionality. You put that on one chip, and you have kind of, well, a whole functionality on one chip, so the system-on-chip. Now, those principles are also being applied in bioinformatics and biotechnology. So, in fact, more and more, you will actually know a lot more than your doctor. Because actually you will have this small chip, well, you put it in your skin, you draw some blood, and it kind of does potentially even real-time analysis, and therefore indeed you don't need to have kind of these weeks waiting, these kind of thousands of dollars to do expensive tests. That will all be done real-time on a kind of system on chip. So a lot of stuff happening in that field too. So, I gave you a couple of examples. You can definitely hypothesize further and think about these exponential underlying trends. Again, think of that 5 megabyte and what happened now. This can happen with all these breakthrough technologies. And so, yes, it's possible that transcendence can happen. That's actually what Ray Kurzweil is predicting. Between around 2043, 2045, depending on when you talk to him, well, he says indeed that there is transcendence. And transcendence means that it will be not possible anymore to disguise if you're now human or you're kind of artificial. That's what he means with transcendence, and this is really what that movie is about. So yes, that can happen, and we'll have to really very, very well understand what this technology is doing, and we as human society have now a moral obligation to think about ethical rules and regulations. I know as engineers we don't like to talk about rules and regulations and processes, but we will have to do that because this technology can really change our world fundamentally. So one example, it's not as kind of exciting as transcendence, but at least, so Claudio also asked me, okay, if you talk about that, maybe give an example about your own venture. What are kind of the techniques that you're using there and why have you done that? So that's why I kind of wanted to allude on Enervalis. So it's definitely not going to be a product pitch, but I just want to kind of highlight some of the techniques that are part of these big ways of technology. So before I come to that, these were kind of also some of my personal drivers. Again, I have been working in a lot of different industries, but after a while, that was also one of my drivers why I started Enervalis. I felt as an engineer that I was actually working on push products. It's like, great, I mean, you work really on new, novel technology, but at the end, you see what's happening. It's actually salespeople, marketing people that are pushing this into the market and kind of trying to change the brain of people why they would need the newest video or the newest PlayStation or whatever. It's nice, but really, it doesn't really solve major world problems. So that's kind of one thing where you say, well, can't we use our brain somewhat better for the big problems which are out there? And actually, also another anecdote, a couple of months ago, I was also talking to a professor in Austin. He was also head of artificial intelligence in that Austin University, and he was kind of really very frustrated. So he said, a lot of my brightest students of artificial intelligence, what those guys are doing, they're wasting their brain, their excellent brain, to go to Facebook, to go to eBay, whatever, and make networking apps and find patterns and to sell more advertisement. He was really very frustrated, and I actually really alluded on that. It's like, indeed, those brains, you can better use them to solve actually these big problems that I was showing earlier. So that's what really got me into this whole energy sector, because I thought this is really one of the big problems out there. Let's see if the brains that we have, we can also do something good with. Now, this is something that I think you need to know. Maybe some of you do. But the whole fuel reserves of, let's say, the top 100 of the oil companies out there, the BPs, the Shells, the Total, the Exxons, I mean, those type of guys. So if you consume only 20% of all their reserves that they currently have in their assets, by then we will already have overachieved the 2 degrees increase that indeed is now already seen as kind of the red thread out there. If that happens, a lot of disaster will start happening. That's the thinking. So even 20% of what they have now in their balance sheets and actually in their physical reserves, if you burn that, that's what's going to happen. So that's actually the next bubble which is going to go out there. You have the financial bubble, you have kind of, well, the bubble of houses and all that stuff. This is the next big bubble happening out there. There's a lot of assets that they have which is only worth like 20%. So Production forecasts, well, here, I mean, a lot of people also know that, so I'm just going to be very brief on that. The only thing that I really want to highlight is that actually the cost to install solar is not taking into account operational costs, because then actually the whole equation even looks a lot better, because when you have gas-fired power plants, well, you also need gas, fossil fuels, so that actually costs operational money. The sun is free. And there is, of course, a little bit of operational money for these solar panels, but it's kind of nearly free. So just the installation, I mean, look at that, by 2025, 2030, it's actually really cheaper than the best technology out there for fossil fuels. So it's just stating that, yes, green energy from a pure financial perspective is also really the way to go. So the future is definitely green, and here a lot of these big companies, and I don't know if some of you guys work for those big companies, the E.ONs, the RWEs, and all those type of Vattenfalls. All those guys together, they have lost, like on 5 years, they've lost like 500 billion in market value. And that was because indeed they had not foreseen this really rapid change of the, certainly in Germany, a rapid change of going to green energy and the implications of that. Because the implications are very vast. There's a lot of imbalance, and actually what happens is green energy gets priority. So that feeds into the network, and well, whenever I produce, I get money for that. So typically what happened is the guys with the gas-fired power plants, they were used to kind of have like 60–70% or even more. That was their business case of operations. Now suddenly a lot of those plants really get only used like 10%, 15%. So meaning, again, a lot of their value on the balance sheet, which was really based on a business case of 20, 30 years of those big machines, is again worthless. So that's why they lost a lot of money. So I've talked about that. Solar is just decreasing, and you've seen that if you watch also kind of Tesla introducing, Elon Musk introducing his battery. He also showed that, but he showed that kind of on a map of Tesla, of Texas, how much kind of space you need for batteries and for solar to power the whole of the states. Well, this is the picture of how much kind of area, physical area you would need to power the world with solar. I know it's not going to be designed that way, but this is kind of just to let you know, solar really has the potential to transform the world. So that's really why we got into this, because indeed we believe very, very much in green energy. And as I mentioned, there are a lot of implications of green energy. There's kind of imbalance cost. And based on that, there need to be means to solve that imbalance. That's kind of the opportunity gap, what I've seen there. And that's really worth hundreds of billions of euro. And this one, I used that also 2 days ago, so I was here also for the scientific conference, so you know that, so I'm not going to have you shut your eyes, but I just want to kind of let you think on that one. When I started my speech, I said, well, think and dream big. That's really what this said also. It's even kind of putting it more stressing. If your dreams are not big enough, that they don't, so if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. So really now is the time, technology is there. There are big problems out there. Think big and get scared about your dreams and just make it happen. So, and to allude further on that one, this is really also a scary quote, which some of you guys have maybe also seen. So the CEO of Cisco, he retired like a couple of months ago. This is what he said. He was also part of one of these big companies. Look at that. I mean, 40% of these companies will be dead in 10 years. That's a scary thought. But that's also an opportunity for all of us. We are the ones that can transform the world. If we really do something with our ideas, we make startups, this is actually what's going to happen. So it's an opportunity. And you know definitely some of these examples, Amazon, Facebook, Airbnb. Airbnb, I mean, that was an interesting statement. That was 2014. That was in a quote where he said, well, yeah, Marriott wants to have like 30,000 new rooms in a year time. I'll do that in 2 weeks. Well, that's really transformational. And he did that just with some software. And even better, the guy wasn't really a software engineer. So again, this is something that you need to dream big, and technology is there, technology will help you. The Ubers, the Teslas, I mean, they all have really radical transformation stuff ongoing. So what I want to state there is, all these small stars amongst us here, we can really transform the world. We don't have to be scared about those big brands out there. The guy at Cisco said it, 40% of those guys will be dead. So someone else will have to fill that gap. That can be us. So what is Enervalis doing there? So our vision, based on really, I believe, very heavy in green energy, is that the future of that whole network will be a fully decentralized network, which is actually the Internet of Energy, which will be sustainable, cost efficient, and really allow full renewability. And based on that, that's our mission statement. We actually make that software operating system to enable actually this demand-side management, which you need to kind of shape your demand based on the production to enable actually the mass market. So not only the big industries, but also like the small homes and everything all together. That's really what we're doing. Now I'll keep it very short. Okay, so there are already some people out there are doing that. That's what I call kind of the first level aggregators, and maybe a name out there that you know is Enervalis. So they typically aggregate these loads from a central perspective, very big loads, they have limited services, but they're not architecturally designed to really cope with this mass market stuff. They're only serving at max, if they would deploy worldwide fully, 25% of this whole energy consumption. There's still like a gap of 60–70% which is unserved. And that's exactly the gap that we want to fill in. That's second generation flexibility aggregators. And what are some of the characteristics? You need to be able to really handle hundreds, thousands, millions of different heterogeneous devices, sensors, consumption devices, all that type of stuff. You need to kind of have a decentral architecture because you need to handle like hundreds of millions households there, so you can't have a central approach there. You need to handle heterogeneous services. So that's what we've done. So I call it kind of the digital brain, Smart Power Suite. And what that does in a very nutshell, if you want to know more, we can talk later on. It just captures any type of sensor information, electrical, thermal, behavioral, energy market prices, all that type of stuff. Feeds into artificial machine learning algorithms. They can do predictions about forecasting of consumption, production, flexibility, energy markets. And then actually we use that information to do optimal control. To either say, okay, we want to optimize for maximizing green energy, want to optimize for minimizing the cost, so trading on the energy market, and avoid capacity constraints on the network due to kind of these imbalances happening there. So that's what we do. We do that in 3 verticals: smart EV charging, we use the flexibility of e-vehicle, smart buildings, flexibility of various devices within buildings, and intelligent microgrids, again, the backbone of the vision that I stated there. And then the mapping towards these technologies, so what are kind of the principles that we are relying on? When I started Enervalis 2.5 years ago, everyone said, I mean, you're crazy, because indeed, I mean, you can't be cost efficient serving like those hundreds of millions of customers. There's too much variety, too much heterogeneous. Those customers on average have a bill of €1,000, so why would they, I mean, how can you actually serve them? You can serve them if you really go about and think about that all these technologies will evolve so fast that they will be very cost effective. And that means like servers, I mean, processing power, data storage is becoming really, really cheap. These devices that you need to kind of process locally in each house. Look at a Raspberry Pi, you can buy that now already for €30. It's an incredible amount of processing power on such little space for €30, and that's even going to go further down. Sensors are, I mean, that's going to be pennies. They're going to throw it all over your house. So relying on all those principles, and of course energy, so we're also relying on the fact that, again, solar is really decreasing and decreasing, that will become the cheapest way to produce your energy. So relying on those, knowing that these principles will take place, that leads me to the fact that, yes, we need to start Enervalis. Yes, maybe it's not 100% cost efficient now, but these trends will evolve and we will be cost efficient and we will be there when it's ready. So that's my last slide. Pursue your own dreams. So I hope you already, I mean, got some, hopefully some inspiration, and I really hope you guys will be part of the transformation of the energy world. Thank you. Are there any questions I should ask? Yes.
Hello?
Hello?
Is it? Yes, it's working. Yeah. Hi, I'm Henrique. I'm from Lisbon. Really enjoyed your talk. I really think that your company is very valuable. You are doing very smart work.
Thank you.
You said now that you predict that you will be very cost efficient in very shortly. But in practical terms, what does it mean today? So, if you are not yet that cost effective, how can you survive for more 1 year, or the time lapse that you predict that you will, that it will be your main entrance to the market?
Yeah. So we'll definitely talk further after this, but I'll give you a brief answer on that now already. So as a startup, you will also learn that you have to be creative. So even though indeed kind of the base technology is not kind of profitable for like millions, because that's indeed the case at the moment, as a startup, we have core expertise. Kind of, we really have very clever software engineers. So there's always need for doing projects in this energy sector with those skills and kind of sell that for a margin and still work on our roadmap. So that's the way. When you saw maybe my presentation, I mean yesterday or the day before, I said we really have actual income. So like we have 600,000 this year of income. That's not to kind of this software as a service model that we have. Partially it's starting, but it's partially starting to, okay, we do clever algorithms for certain people and we ask a recurring fee for that. So that's kind of how we survive. It's kind of a, yeah, clever way.
Thanks.
Any further question?
Well, if not, I'll still be here during the dinner session, and if anybody wants to connect with me, so just search my name on LinkedIn, send me a connection request, but do please kind of refer to this event and also say why you would like to connect, otherwise it's really like very difficult. For the rest, really, I hope you will make the future bright. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I would like to give you now the chance to talk a little bit through with your neighbors or with anybody else here in the room. And we are going to make a 10 minutes break. This means that we are going to meet at 5:30 here again, and we are going to start with the next part of the program. 5:30.